In New Learning by Calantis and Cope, they've identified 7 principles of synergistic feedback systems. Of the 7 principles, I'm quickly going to go through each of the 7, relating them to the bell ringer type of test. The first one is ubiquitous learning. Ubiquitous learning, obviously anytime, anywhere. Back at the time I would have written a bell ringer test, anytime, anywhere, you could argue that it was a possibility. Textbooks would give you images of specimens. The actual specimens themselves were not accessible. We did not have the internet to get a different view of the specimens. The second principle is recursive feedback. Formative assessment does not exist with a bell ringer type of test. Multimodal meaning is the third principle in a synergistic feedback system. This one you could argue there might be a couple of different modes that are available. Text, you often have text describing images. At the time that I would have written these tests, there was no sound. There was a slight bit of data. There was nothing digital, no video, that sort of thing, with the lack of internet access at that point in time. The next principle, active knowledge making, this is the construction of content or knowledge rather than memorizing. And quite obviously, the bell ringer test is strictly a memorization. So the active knowledge meaning does not apply to a bell ringer test. Collaborative intelligence actually has 3 different components. The first component being able to critically review, and then if relevant, you can link the knowledge back to the world. Working collaboratively on the same text or item or knowledge or product, or scaffolded feedback processes where you're giving credit to others. Again, this is not occurring. This is an individual effort, an individual task, strictly assessing the memory recall. The third component of collaborative intelligence refers to the work of the students being oriented directly back to that community of students and not to the assessing teacher. So again, there's not a collaborative intelligence component based on these 3 in a bell ringer test. The 6th principle of a synergistic feedback system refers to metacognition. For metacognition, there is no sharing of the assessment responsibility. There's no self-assessment, no peer assessment during the actual assessment. I suppose practice prior to, students could set that up themselves. We did not have practice types of bell ringer tests prior to the actual bell ringer test. The last component, the last set principle of a synergistic feedback system is differentiated learning. In a differentiated learning system or environment, you're obviously working to the interests and needs of the individual students, and the teachers would build in scaffolding feedback systems between peers. This again is not occurring in this type of assessment. Constant feedback that you would get in a differentiated learning environment is not occurring in a bell ringer assessment. So reviewing the 7 principles, quite obviously, quite definitively, the bell ringer test does not meet the criteria for a synergistic feedback system.